So questions can be entered into the chat box in Zoom today, and we'll do our best to field these as time permits. The chat function can be located on the bottom navigation bar in Zoom. So we really value your input and comments. We actively use this information to better shape administrative rules to meet your needs. So please continue to be engaged throughout the process. Comments can be submitted to Commerce using the form that we posted on our webpage, and I believe Judy is going to paste it into the chat box in Zoom today. Next slide, please. Commerce's mission is to strengthen communities, and we do this through a broad range of policy and programs, including housing and homelessness, business assistance, community services, energy, and so much more. Next slide, please. This is the agenda for this morning's workshop. We're going to be providing a brief summary of comments received to date. We'll do a recap of the elements of House Bill 1390 and integrating these into clean buildings requirements. We're going to talk through the compliance deadline for district energy system decarbonization plans, and we will leave time for questions as well. We're going to work to wrap up the workshop by 12 noon with a quick break, hopefully at the top of the 11 o'clock hour. Next slide. So I wanted to provide brief introductions to our rulemaking team this morning. So our entire team is dedicated to providing timely, actionable, and clear information about the state's clean buildings law and requirements for district energy system decarbonization planning. My name is Emily Salzberg, and I'm the Managing Director for the Buildings Unit within the State Energy Office here at the Department of Commerce. Your presenters today are going to be Judy Darst, Donnie Westfall, Luke Howard, James Witherington, and Annalyn Bergen. We work with a dedicated and talented team of staff focused on database development, policy development, and program implementation. Next slide, please. So I want to take a quick step back and briefly review the role of buildings in the state's greenhouse gas emissions. So buildings have a profound impact on the environment and our carbon emissions. The building sector is the state's second largest carbon polluter, second only to transportation. As Washington's population has grown, greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector has increased significantly. It's actually the fastest growing sector with carbon emissions. Existing buildings create unique challenges and opportunities as the state works to meet its greenhouse gas emissions limits that we have in statute. The 2021 State Energy Strategy determined that investment in building energy efficiency paired with electrification is the least cost pathway to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. Next slide, please. So this is a brief look at the rulemaking process for those of you who may be joining a state agency rulemaking for the first time. There are three key filings that we provide to the Code Revisor's Office. So we filed our CR 101 form in November of 2023, and this began the rulemaking process. The CR 102 form will capture the proposed rules, and it's followed by a public hearing. The CR 103 form is the last step in codifying rules into the Washington Administrative Code, or WAC. Next slide, please. This timeline covers our rulemaking schedule for district energy system decarbonization planning, which encompasses all of the steps I just described. We'll cover different technical topics at each of the workshops. Our last workshop was a kickoff workshop, which provided an introduction to the legislation and what we're setting out to do in this rulemaking. This workshop will focus on developing the rules to implement House Bill 1390. And finally, we'll have a workshop in March that's focused on administrative requirements before filing our draft rules in April, and then filing final rules likely in June. Next slide, please. This slide shows the cycle of public comments during the workshop phase. After every workshop, draft rules will be emailed to all the registrants and later posted to the website as soon as possible. We will give 2 weeks for comment on draft rule text, and we summarize feedback at the subsequent workshop where the process repeats itself. We ask that participants in our workshops be respectful and use the chats or comment forms to provide feedback. Our goal is for these rules to be a reflection of our work here together, and our rules will only benefit from these workshops being inclusive and participatory. So we just ask that everybody be respectful and to contribute. Now I'm going to hand it off to James to summarize the comments we've received after our last workshop. Thank you so much.
Right, if you can move on to the next slide, please. So we received 4 comments in our last workshop, and this is basically just a summarization of those comments. The first one deals with elaborating on the definition of a qualified person responsible for the development of a decarbonization plan. The next comment deals with providing sample decarbonization plans, particularly when it comes to private industry considerations as whether or not to opt in. The next comment, any building roof with RTUs that has access to sunlight should have a solar ventilation air preheating collector installed on the air intake hood. Next slide, please. And the last comment, HB1390 makes presumptive statements implying preservation or expansion of existing district systems. However, that may not be the best fit strategy, and removal of the district energy system and placement of high efficiency building specific HVAC systems is not contrary to the intent of the law. So those 4 comments are what we received through the last workshop. We ask that if you do have a comment that you'd like to file, we have the link to the public comments form in the chat. Additionally, if you have any specific questions for the Clean Building staff, we'll also provide a link to our customer support ticket as well.
All right, thanks, James. Next slide, please. I'm just going to do a quick recap of the House Bill 1390 legislation and just what all it entails. So House Bill 1390 legislation focuses on state campus district energy systems and the requirement to develop and implement a decarbonization plan. So the legislation also identifies campus district energy systems and gives them the ability to opt in to the decarb compliance pathway. So state campus district energy systems were defined as having 5 or more buildings with over 100,000 square feet of conditioned space connected to the district energy system and are owned by the state of Washington or a public-private partnership that includes 1 public buildings owner and 1 private entity. Campus district energy systems are defined as having 3 or more buildings with over 100,000 combined square feet of conditioned space connected to that district system. Can be owned by a single entity, a public-private partnership with a private owner of the district system and a public buildings owner, or 2 private entities, 1 private owner of the district system and 1 private owner of the buildings connected to that system. Next slide, please. So House Bill 1390 legislation requires owners of state campus district energy systems to develop their decarbonization plan that provides a strategy for up to 15 years for the state campus district energy system to decarbonize. The Department of Commerce may approve a decarbonization plan with a time frame longer than 15 years. The legislation requires the inclusion of the following in these decarbonization plans: mechanisms to replace fossil fuels in the heating plants, evaluation of options to partner with nearby sources and uses of waste heat and cooling, examination of opportunities to expand the footprint served by the decarbonization district system, and a plan that includes meeting the energy use intensity of the campus served by the district system. Next slide. In addition to the mandatory requirements, the legislation also encourages consideration of including the following in the decarb plans: distribution network upgrades, on-site energy storage facilities, space cooling for residential facilities, labor and workforce development considerations, public-private partnership opportunities, and waste heat recovery from domestic sewage or other industrial symbiosis projects. Next slide, please. So the decarbonization plan can be a pathway to compliance with the Clean Building Standard. Approved decarbonization plans must include a pathway for reaching the energy use intensity target for the campus at the time that the decarbonization plan is fully implemented. Additionally, an energy management plan and an operations and maintenance program must be implemented in accordance with the standard in all campus buildings connected to the district system, regardless of whether or not they are covered. As an alternative to meeting the EUIT, decarbonization plans can include a pathway where an energy audit is performed documenting that energy saved from the decarbonization plan is greater than the energy efficiency measures identified for the campus buildings. Phased implementation may also be employed by the decarbonization plan, allowing for delayed implementation of any required energy efficiency measures that are not beyond their useful life. Now I'm going to hand it over to Judy Darst to discuss integration of House Bill 1390 into the Clean Buildings Standard.
Thanks, Donnie.
Yep.
So this is House Bill Rule Integration 1390 into the standard. This is a breakdown of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard by section. The standard is comprised of ASHRAE Standard 100 2018 with state amendments in WAC 19450. The integrated document can be downloaded through our Clean Buildings website, and I will post the link in the chat when I'm done here. But to let you know, the February 2024 version, which includes Tier 2 requirements, will be soon available. So before you download the document, confirm that it's the revised version. This is a current HB 1390 rulemaking. We are making edits to these existing sections, and we're also adding a new normative Annex W, which is specific to the district energy system decarbonization. We're asked what the difference between normative annex is and an informative annex. Normative is a list of requirements, and the informative is for information. Next slide. So to incorporate House Bill 1390 district energy system decarbonization requirements into the Clean Building Performance Standard, we're amending the campus definition and adding these new definitions, the rest of the list. The sources for these definitions are House Bill 1390, ASHRAE, and Seattle BEPS to align with them as best we can. As we continue to develop the decarbonization rules, we'll need to amend. We may or may not need to amend other definitions. Now I'm going to hand it over to Luke, and he will go into more detail of normative Annex W and the other amended sections.
Excellent. Thank you, Judy. I'm going to share my screen here. So the attendees of this workshop should have received a copy of the proposed rules this morning from Online. I am going to present this material, and so we'll have a visual of it here as soon as I share my screen. I have included some notes in my version. Everybody attending this workshop who is registered will get a copy of my version with the notes post-workshop today. All right. Can someone verify they can see my screen?
I can see it.
All right, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom of the document that you received this morning. Makes more sense to present this material from Annex W, and then we can work through the references to the Annex W within the main body of the standard, starting with sections 3 and moving through section 9. Okay, so as Judy noted, Annex W is the proposed new normative annex that's going to represent the requirements of 1390. Let me modify my screen here so I can see this better. So W 1.1 to 1.2 are representing the administrative requirements can be met for both anything defined as a state campus, anything defined as a campus district energy system, which is a privately owned district energy, or buildings connected to a privately owned district energy system. And let me rephrase that. State-owned buildings are required to comply with Annex W and a decarbonization plan. Privately owned campuses that are connected to a district energy system may opt in to the requirements of Annex W. So today we're going to be covering proposals to the requirements of the standard. Our next workshop, we're going to be covering the administrative or reporting requirements of Annex W for the decarbonization plan. Okay, so the main body of Annex W, we're going to start going through right now. As far as formatting of this, when we travel up to section 3 through 9, you're going to see amendments to the existing requirements of the standard as in red text with being underlined to represent proposed amendments to the existing language in the standard. Here in Annex W, since it's new, it's not going to be marked up. It's just going to be shown in blue text here. But do keep in mind that these are all new requirements and specific to the decarbonization plan. And you'll see my notes in the sidebar here to help explain some of the requirements here in brief. So the House Bill 1390 will require these decarbonization plans as noted for state campuses. And again, campuses are defined as buildings connected to a district energy system. So the decarbonization plan can cover a 15-year span or greater. They will be evaluated by Commerce. And that plan should include a mechanism for replacing any fossil fueled district heating plants with a decarbonized plant. So exception A is an allowance. No more than 10% of the system's annual heat input to the system comes from fossil fuels or electric resistance sources. So that's an allowance for supplemental or backup resources. Exception B focuses on decommissioning of existing district heating systems. So is that allowed as part of a decarb plan? This proposal here would allow it under certain contexts. So if it is proven through evaluation and represented in the decarb plan that it's more cost effective to decouple from a district heating system and to decarbonize buildings' heating systems at the building level rather than the district heating system, then Commerce may approve such plans. So items 2, 3, 4, and 5 are from House Bill 1390. So in addition to providing a mechanism for replacing fossil fuel in the district heating system, the standard will also require evaluation of possible options to partner with nearby sources and uses of waste heat and cooling, an examination of opportunities to add buildings or other facilities to the system. And then item 4, an evaluation, prioritization, and schedule plan for meeting the requirements of section 4.1 and 4.3 for the campus. So 4.3 really gets into the performance metric of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. So the decarbonization plan will have to have a scheduled plan for either meeting the energy use intensity target for the campus or the investment criteria of the standard for that campus. Throughout this workshop today, we're going to talk about campus a lot. In the context of the Clean Building Performance Standard, just keep in mind that a campus means buildings, collection of buildings connected to the district energy system. So it's not as broad as we typically think of the definition of campus. So you think of college campuses or a business park campus. It's an area within the Clean Buildings Performance Standards, narrower scope. Okay, so the decarb plan is also going to require the implementation of an energy management plan and an operations and maintenance program that includes every building that's connected to the district energy system. So every building on that campus, regardless of size, could be greater than 50,000 square feet, tier 1 building, a tier 2 building, 20 to 50,000 square feet, or any buildings less than 20,000 square feet, regardless of occupancy and building activity type. So the recommended district energy system decarbonization plan considerations. Donnie covered this in the slideshow. I'm not going to spend much detail on that. We have not amended any of those requirements from House Bill 1390, so you see them listed here. As well as the utility engagement. We want to make sure that the utilities are involved in are notified and the decarbonization plan is discussed with them. Lastly, the compliance schedule here, we don't have any data to show you at this point. This will be part of the administrative requirements workshop, which will be next month. All right, so at this point, I'm going to jump to the top of this document, and we'll start with the specific amendments to the existing standard. All right, so Judy has included some rulemaking procedures, some information on how to read the document and how to respond to the document. So part of rulemaking is it is a public process. We do want to see comments from stakeholders, any proposed edits, any added language. Please use the track changes functions of Word, Microsoft Word, to document your suggestions and comments and send them into Commerce for us to review and consider. So there are some proposed languages in section 1 and 2, purpose and scope. This is just to cover campus district energy systems and the decarbonization requirements of House Bill 1390. I don't have any comments to make on those. You can take a look at that and see if you have any suggestions. Moving into section 3, definitions. As Judy has noted, we have added some definitions. Most of these are specific to the legislation in House Bill 1390. So you'll see them defined here. What is a campus district energy system? So again, a campus is a collection of buildings served by a district heating, cooling, water reuse, or power system. A campus district energy system is what is defined as a privately owned campus. In context of the decarbonization plan, it must be made up of 3 or more buildings serving 100,000 square feet or more. And there is some definition here regarding the district energy system itself. It could be owned by the building owner. It could be in a partnership, a public-private partnership, or a private partnership. District energy system, a system that provides heating, cooling, or heating and cooling to a campus. through a distributed system providing steam, hot water, cool water to a building. So we added this, some of these definitions to help provide more clarity and to use simpler terms throughout the sections of the standard. You'll see a couple of those here. One of them is actually, and it's kind of confusing here, I will point out that some of the amendments made may not be in red. They will be in blue. And these are because of formatting rules within Microsoft Word. So keep in mind that a couple of these amendments are underlined, but they're not in red as the instructions note early on in the document. So decarbonization plan is a term that we inserted into section 3 to help bring some clarity and use simpler terms. So throughout this document, if we talk about a decarbonization plan and you see that term italicized, it means essentially decarb plan is Annex W or the result of House Bill 1390. So decarbonizing of the district energy system itself. We have proposed to adopt City of Seattle's BEPS program, renewable natural gas definition. So this will help bring clarity to what renewable natural gas is. And in our next workshop, we'll talk about reporting requirements. We'll directly address renewable natural gas. Again, some more definition provided by House Bill 1390. So we talked about a campus district energy system being privately owned campus. We have a specific definition in the standard for state campus district energy system. So state campuses are required to meet the provisions of Annex W in a decarbonization plan. And this would be buildings served by a district energy system. There must be 5 or more buildings that make up a total of 100,000 square feet or more. And the district system can be owned by the state of Washington or be a public-private partnership. James, before I move into section 4, are there any specific questions identified for to this point?
Yep, there are actually a couple here.
Okay.
So the first question is, can an organization that's looking to install a new district system go the House Bill 1390 route, even if they don't have one today?
Yeah, that's a great question. We haven't considered that at this point, but we'll make note of that and see how we can address that within the context of House Bill 1390.
Okay. The next question is, if an entity misses the June 30th, 2024 filing window, can they opt into 1390 at a later date?
As the legislation states, you would need to notify Commerce by June 30, 2024 in order and start your plan at that point. We don't have any alternative to that at this point. We will consider how that may be able to fit within the context of this legislation.
Okay, next question. When would the 3.1.1.1 exemptions be filed, and what happens if the state of technology changes significantly enough that the initial results of the audit and life cycle cost analysis underpinning the exemption are no longer valid?
I'm trying to figure out what 3.1.1.1 exemptions are. Are we talking about Annex Z3?
Annex W, sorry.
Oh, and Annex W. This is all new to us as well, so I'm going to scroll back down and see what I can.
Luke, this is Justin Lee. I'm the one who asked it. It's specifically the question about allowing you to remove the district energy system and go to individual heating based on the cost effectiveness of an audit in LCCA.
Yeah. Okay. So can you ask the question again, please?
Yeah. So if we do, so when in the 15-year timeline, when would we file exemptions for, hey, we're going to remove our district energy system because it's the most cost-effective way to do that? And then the second part of that question would be, everyone's sort of looking at like large-scale heat pumps, which are very expensive today. Say in 7 or 8 years, those actually become substantially cheaper. And the audit, the results of that audit in LCCA that originally said it was more cost-effective to remove the district energy system are now no longer valid.
Yeah, the decarbonization plan is required to be submitted to Commerce by June 1st of 2025. That plan would need to include any plan to decouple from the district heating system. So it has to be done within a year from June 1st. And be part of that decarbonization plan as time goes on. So part of that plan would be a plan to and schedule to replace and phase out that district energy system within the 15-year decarbonization plan. If with decarbonize folks that are pursuing compliance through the decarbonization plan will need to check in with Commerce every 5 years, reevaluate the decarb plan, make any amendments to it that are appropriate. So Justin and folks on the call, these proposals are have room for development within the administrative requirements of the standards to the next workshop. So we don't have all these answers defined. If you have suggestions on guardrails that we put in place for some of these proposals, including this specific exemption or allowance, alternative, whatever you want to call it, please send those with your comments, and we will address some of these at the next workshop. We will also address any amendments that we make to these proposed rules in the next workshop, even if they're not related to the administrative requirements, which is the topic of the next workshop. So to answer your question, these details are still needing to be ironed out, and we appreciate any input from stakeholders.
Luke, are you ready for some more questions?
Sure. If it kind of still going with this flow.
Yep. So I think I'm going to jump forward a few questions because this is related to what you just answered. What is the process of amending a decarb plan within the 15 years?
Amending. Well, we'll be working on those details in the admin requirements, for our next workshop. But part of it is going to be, part of the requirements of this decarb plan is to meet the energy use intensity or the investment criteria of the standard. So when we have a check-in, the reevaluation or the check-in with the decarb plan on a 5-year basis, you want to evaluate, make sure that you're on schedule with all the activities that were outlined in the initial decarb plan, and make any adjustments to the decarb plan as needed. For example, it's likely that the energy use intensity targets will drop as each cycle of the standard goes out into the future. So 2030, the energy use intensity target is likely to have been lowered. So the decarb plan would need to evaluate where the new threshold is and see if they're still on course to meet that target. So we will speak in more detail about the specific reporting requirements in our next workshop.
All right, next question. Is biomass an allowed thermal fuel?
Yeah, without having the that will be something that will be defined within the next workshop when we start talking about administrative requirements and reporting requirements. So we'll define what renewable natural gas is. Biomass is likely to be included in that definition of acceptable carbon-free fuels.
Okay, next question. Does the definition of district energy systems include the provision for on-site generation of fossil-free electricity?
Would you repeat that question again, James?
Yeah, certainly. Does the definition of district energy systems include the provision for on-site generation of fossil-free electricity?
It doesn't specifically address this. This is something that we can look at and see if we need to put more definition within the standard. But on-site generation or renewable energy generation is part of the standard itself.
Okay, next question. How does RCW 43.31.625 industrial waste coordination legislation anchor House Bill 1390, as this is critical to eco districts or district campus building design and holds precedent? And there's actually two more parts to this really quick. If I'll go ahead and read it all. For example, waste heat utilities, IWC are within Commerce 8 interest areas funding since 2017 to present. And goes on to say biomass variations is part of IWC legislation and the industrial waste coordination scope.
Yeah, I can't speak of this in much depth. I would have to, or we would have to look into this closer offline. We'll take this comment and respond outside of this workshop. But we'll run through as we ran through Annex W and Donnie showed within the slideshow. There are specific provisions that are encouraged, and there are specific provisions that are required. So it's encouraged to evaluate, or it's required to evaluate use of waste heat as well as in all its different forms, as noted, but it's not a specific requirement for House Bill 1390 to utilize those resources. Does anybody else from the Clean Buildings team here have more to comment on that question? Okay, next question, James.
Right now, I think that's the last of the questions that I'm seeing.
Okay, great. We'll continue to stroll through the amendments to the general requirements of the standard to address the provisions of House Bill 1390. So you noted in Annex W, we reference sections 4.1, which is identifying some general requirements of the Clean Building Performance Standard. We added some language for clarity here, specific to the district energy systems. So you'll note where we have used the new term decarbonization plan, just as kind of a catch-all phrase instead of using the mouthful of district energy system decarbonization, etc. So this new section just notes that the general requirements of the Clean Building Performance Standard, including meeting either the energy use intensity target of the standard or the investment criteria of the standard at the campus level is a requirement, as well as implementation of the energy management plan and the operations and maintenance program at the campus level. We have made specific amendments in 4.2 for the energy management plan operations and maintenance program that it needs to be demonstrated on Form A, that it has been implemented in accordance with the standard. We've added some language noting that the O&M requirements are that there only needs to be one submitted for the whole campus. It must include all buildings on the campus, including buildings that are not Tier 1 or Tier 2 covered buildings. So buildings smaller than 20,000 square feet that are connected to that district energy system must also be included in the O&M program. So also some specific language on when the operations and maintenance program shall be implemented. This proposal would require the O&M program to be implemented on a graduated schedule based on the building size. So that's in accordance with section Z 3.2, which is the implementation schedule for Tier 1 buildings. Annex Y 3.2 for Tier 2 buildings. And then for any buildings not covered, so non-Tier 1 or Tier 2 buildings, implementation, operations, and maintenance program on that size buildings would be by 2030. So essentially buildings over 220,000 square feet would need to be implementing their operations and maintenance program by 2026, 2027 for the middle cohort of Tier 1 buildings, so buildings 90 to 220,000 square feet, and 2028 for the largest buildings, or the smallest buildings between 50 and 90. And Tier 2 buildings, their compliance date is 2027 for implementation of the operations and maintenance program. We've included language identifying the energy management plan as a requirement of the campus or the decarbonization plan. Again, like the operations and maintenance program, only one energy management plan is needed, but must cover all buildings of the campus.
Hey, Luke, there are a couple of questions on the O&M plan. Do you want to go ahead and address those now before you
Sure.
keep moving on? Okay, perfect. So what about instances where O&M activities divert resources from decarbonization by forcing investment into run-to-fail equipment that will be replaced by the decarbonization plan?
You know, I think there is room for us to address such specific situations and unique situations within the decarbonization plan itself. So from what I understand, this question is saying is if the decarbonization plan is phasing out a specific equipment or system, does it make sense to implement the operations and maintenance program for that system that's going to be phased out and irrelevant. I think those specific items can be covered in a decarbonization plan. It's a good comment, and we will look into seeing whether we need to directly address this within the rules itself.
All right, and the next question is, if the campus has buildings not connected to the district energy system, are those included in the O&M plan?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to the confusing definitions. The original legislation, RCW 1927.210 through 250, noted that it specifically defined campus as collection of buildings served by a district energy system. So what we're talking about today with the decarb plan, it's only addressing those buildings served by the district energy system. So if you have a campus, in the traditional definition of campus, where some buildings are not served by a district energy system, those buildings would need to are not required to comply with the decarb plan. They, depending on their size and their building activity, may be subject to the clean building law individually. So the answer is no. In the context of the decarb plan, you would not need to include any buildings not connected to the district system in the decarb plan and the requirements, provisions of the standard.
I think that's the only questions we have so far on that.
Okay, I'll move forward. Okay, section 4.3, put some specific language in here to address the decarbonization plan. The energy use intensity needs to be developed and reported within Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And within the standard, we note Portfolio Manager reporting is Form C.
Luke, before we move on to section 5, we're almost at the top of the hour. Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, I think we can afford to take a break. I don't think we need a full 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes.
How about we come back at 11 a.m.? It's 10:52 right now.
Okay.
Okay, let's take a break. Can we pause recording, please? Could press start the recording. I don't know if you've done that yet.
Just did it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Luke, you have the floor.
Thank you. Madeline, can you confirm that my screen is still sharing?
Yes, we're on section 5, energy management plan.
Right. All right, so we have added some language here to exempt non-covered buildings, so buildings smaller than 20,000 square feet, from the lighting schedule and the lighting satisfaction survey requirements of the energy management plan of the standard. Although they are providing an exemption, building the decarbonization plan should look into these non-covered buildings for potential energy savings as low-hanging fruit and effort to meet the energy use intensity requirements of the standards. All right, so 5.2.1.2 We added some specific language that the energy use intensity for the campus shall be developed at the campus level. So all buildings connected to the district energy system, and as well as the energy used to power the district heating system needs to be measured on the input side. So energy going into the district heating system. This language is required because the standard itself is designed to be building centric, where the energy use intensity is measured at all energy entering a building. So we wanted to be specific that for the decarbonization plan, energy use intensity needs to be measured for all buildings. But when it comes to energy from the district heating or district system serving these buildings, the energy is measured at the input side of the district system. So you'll see we don't have anything listed here for Section 6. Section 6 is specific to operations and maintenance program. We didn't feel that there were any amendments needed to add clarity there. Keep in mind, in the rulemaking, we are only adding language or making amendments to align with the House Bill 1390. In some instances, there may be more detail that we can provide in a guidance document, but we are not intending the standard itself to be full of instructional type of material. So if you have specific questions or comments regarding clarity, please send those comments in. We may incorporate those changes into the proposed rules, or they may be good content for guidance documents. Okay, so Section 7 covers the specifics of developing the energy use intensity target for a building. Want to make it clear that the targets are to be developed at the building level first, and then incorporated into an area weighted average energy use intensity target for the campus. Any building that does not have an energy use intensity target. So let's say, for example, if the district heating system itself is housed in the building where 75% or more of the building's activities do not have a target. So utility buildings or power plants do not have a target. So in those situations where your district heating system is in a building that's independent of the rest of the campus, you would not include the GFA, gross floor area of that building, into the energy use intensity target development because that building does not have a target. So you wouldn't be able to relate it to any target and creation of an area weighted energy use intensity target for the campus. So we're just bringing clarity to that. When you are developing the energy use intensity and Energy Start Portfolio Manager, the square footage and the energy use of that utility plant shall be incorporated into portfolio managed calculation for EUI for the campus. So if you can think about it, as an individual building that is not part of a campus, it's going to have mechanical space that houses the HVAC system for the building. So in general, when we're complying at the building level, there's always going to be some space in that building that is designated for HVAC equipment, and it has its own energy use intensity incorporated into the whole building as a whole. So you can kind of think of our treatment of these utility plants in that context, if that's helpful. There are some specific exceptions allowed in 7.2.3 in the development of a target, energy use intensity target for buildings where they may have spaces without building activity targets, or with the buildings primarily just a single building activity. The target can be developed at a single building activity level. Options 1 and 2. There are also some exceptions that allow for the emission of spaces within the building with building activities that don't have targets. For example, data center. You can emit those spaces from the target as well as from the development of the EUI if you meet the provisions of exception 3 or 4. So when we are building a decarbonization plan and developing the target for a campus, keep in mind that these exceptions, 7.2.3, apply at the building level. So you apply those at the building level first, and then you do an area-weighted aggregation of energy use intensity target for the campus. This is specifically important to keep in mind when we think of option 1. If it's a lot different to evaluate a building in terms of its primary building activity at a building level. So 75% or more of that building activity is one single building activity. You can identify that building as being a single building activity type. We are not applying that exception or these exceptions to the campus level. So 75% of a campus is one building activity. You cannot apply that to this exception to the campus wide. So this amendment here addresses that, requiring that you create that target at the building level and then create an area weighted target from there. James, are there any specific questions to section 7 I can cover?
Yep, there are several actually, so it's a good point. I was about to interject here. So let's see, the first question is, what consideration has been given when EUI may increase in order to decarbonize, reduce greenhouse gases in terms of fuel switching, thermal energy storage, peak shifting, shaving that reduce greenhouse gases but do not contribute to efficiency? How can comments support / address this?
So as the proposed rules currently stand, as you know, the energy use intensity target or the investment criteria, the standard need to be met. So if decarbonization actually creates a higher energy use intensity, then the path for compliance with the Clean Building Performance Standard would be the investment criteria. not the energy use intensity target. I imagine in most cases, the target or the energy use intensity will be lowered through decarbonization. It may not be lowered all the way to the target, and that's where implementation of building level energy efficiency measures can help complement the decarbonization in effort to get the campus energy use intensity down to the target. So as of now, the investment criteria is the pathway for any, whether it's building level or campus level compliance with the standard, where the energy use intensity target cannot be met through cost-effective energy efficiency measures.
Right. Next question. Does the net energy use reporting for the attached buildings duplicate the reporting required for the building's House Bill 1257 compliance?
Yeah, so the net energy calculation is the same. So with the one caveat that we've added in detail there is within the standard currently, net energy is calculated as energy into the building minus any energy exported from the building. So renewable energy, excess renewable energy. So the only change is the requirement at the campus level that the energy into the district energy system is measured at the input side and not at the building level. So you don't measure, let's give an example of a district steam system. For the decarbonization plan, you would measure the energy serving the district plant and not the steam that's serving each individual building.
All right, next question. Are there going to be any exemptions or funding for buildings that aren't sub-metered? We have several older buildings that aren't on a district system, but do share a common utility feed, i.e. electrical and gas. Without the funding for sub-metering, this is a cost-prohibitive problem for our Tier 1 buildings.
Yeah, so sub-metering, I'm not aware of any specific funding for sub-metering. Let's keep in mind that the decarbonization plan is a requirement for state-owned buildings connected to a district energy system. I do know of specific state agencies that have requested money for sub-metering. And this would be certainly some funding that would be worthy in order to meet the requirements of the decarbonization plan.
Can I add on to that, Luke?
Mm-hmm.
Just to interject, Patrick's question is talking about buildings not on a district system. So just complying with Tier 1.
Well, yeah, and I imagine it in association with the decarbonization plan, you may have some campuses, so served by a district building, served by a district system, whose, let's say, electricity is served by a master meter that serves buildings that are not on that district energy system. Therefore, the campus is kind of polluted by buildings that are not served by the district energy system as far as its electrical meter. In those cases, they would need to be sub-metered out in order to get an accurate EUI of the campus itself.
Okay, last question. Is there guidance for how energy use is to be allocated between buildings on a district system, since energy intensity is to be measured at the system input rather than metered at the building?
Yeah, currently there are no allowances in the proposed rules. Again, anybody that has strong opinions and comments regarding this methodology, feel free to submit them. When we think about, just, you know, district systems have combustion inefficiencies, or distribution inefficiencies. All buildings will have some sort of HVAC efficiency. If they're fossil fuel fired, they're going to have some combustion inefficiencies. So buildings served by a district energy system, I see the combustion inefficiencies to be reciprocal of building level heating systems. There are some distribution losses, obviously, between the district system and the buildings that it's serving. Those are additional losses that are not accounted for specifically within this standard. If you have specific comments on the impacts of that on the EUI of a building, feel free to submit those. If you have ideas for allowances, please let us know. But at this point, we haven't determined a need for that.
Right. That was the last question, Luke.
Right. Okay, moving into section 8. Oops, looks like we're skipping straight to 9. Section 8 is requirements of energy audits. Section 9 is really about implementation and measurement and verification. So there were some amendments we wanted to make to section 9 for the decarbonization plans. One area where we made some notes and amended was the measurement and verification for meeting the energy use intensity target. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that energy efficiency measures can be implemented at any building on the campus, regardless of whether it's a tier 1 or tier 2 building, in order to lower the energy use intensity for the campus. So if you have if your energy audit shows that there is some low-hanging fruit within buildings that are not tier 1 or tier 2, by all means, use your money wisely and invest in those buildings in order to get the campus itself down to the EUIT. This comment is quite lengthy. This is in regards to buildings pursuing or campuses pursuing the investment criteria. So the investment criteria will require that energy use and an energy audit identifying all cost-effective energy efficiency measures on tier 1 buildings. That will identify a specific estimated savings associated with those energy efficiency measures. That'll give you a baseline. So let's say it's 500,000 BTUs per year. In lieu of implementing those energy efficiency measures, the standard allows you to make that investment into the district energy system as long as that savings is greater or equal to the 500,000 BTUs that the energy audit identified in those tier 1 buildings. it may be that the investment in the district energy system doesn't save that much. So the full 500,000 or more, you may need to implement some energy efficiency measures at the building level in order to meet that 500,000 BTU target. Those energy efficiency measures don't need to be, not required to be in the tier 1 buildings. That energy audit was performed in order to develop that baseline savings requirement, 500,000. Those energy efficiency measures can be implemented on any of the buildings in order to accomplish that baseline savings. So the standard is pushing people towards making the most cost-effective investments. Okay, and we're back down to Annex W here. So James, if there's specific questions that I can address right now, I'll do so. If not, we'll jump back to the slideshow. I got a couple summary slides, and then we can do more Q&A at that point.
Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing anything right now.
Okay. So I will stop sharing, and Hanlin, if you can
I
present.
did get one come in if you.
Okay. Mhm.
Yep. Can water savings be a factor in determining cost effectiveness for EEMs?
Water savings directly associated with an energy efficiency measure can be associated with the cost effectiveness. So let's say, for example, one of the energy efficiency measures is low flow fixtures for hot water. You're going to get energy savings from that, and you're also going to get some water savings. That can be incorporated into that cost analysis.
Yeah, and it did specify, I'm sorry, associated with district steam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the only question we have so far.
Do you see the slideshow?
I do, thank you.
Okay, great.
Go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. Okay, just a little summary. Anlin made this great graphic. I thought I would share it. So meeting the Clean Building Performance Standard as a campus. So this is the decarbonization plan. There's got to be a part of the plan is benchmarking. So benchmarking is actually going to be required. We'll go over this in administrative requirements at next workshop. But as we're thinking right now, benchmarking is going to be required as part of that reporting to us June 1st of this year. We may just hold off on that until the decarbonization plan itself, but benchmarking is certainly going to be needed to be in that benchmarking plan that's submitted to Commerce by June 1st of 2025. Implementation of the energy management plan and operations and maintenance program is required of all buildings connected to the campus, regardless of whether they're tier 1, tier 2, or a not covered building. The reporting schedule I noted is based on section Z 3.2 and Y 3.2, so tier 1 and tier 2 requirements of the standard. And then any building that's not a covered building would need that EMP and O&M to be represented in that EMP and O&M program by 2030. And then again, there needs to be a plan and schedule for meeting the energy use intensity target and the investment criteria of the standard. And that would need to be met by full implementation of the decarbonization plan. Next slide, please. This is a slide we had in our previous workshop as well. For your reference, you have it in writing here. You start the plan by 2024. What that plan, what that process looks like as far as reporting to Commerce that you've started the plan, we will be covering in next workshop. Submitting the plan by June of 2025. The administrative requirements for submittal of those plans will be covered in the next workshop. And then we have progress reporting starting in June of 2030 and every 5 years after that until completion. And again, the details of that reporting process will be covered in our administrative workshop next month. Here is just a timeline for that energy management plan, operations and maintenance program implementation, again, in accordance with the size of the building. So these are the dates per building size. Next slide. Looks like we've got opportunity for questions and answers. So let's continue to answer some questions, ask some questions, and then James and Annalyn can finish things off here once all questions have been addressed that we have time for.
Yep. All right. So what's the time frame for the benchmark start and end month?
So benchmarking can be any 12 consecutive months within the previous 2 years of the reporting date.
Next question is, will the presentation be sent out?
Yes, it will. And the proposed, including the Word document I went through, the proposals with my notes in it. And as a reminder, when we have comments and proposed amendments, edits, feel free, and we prefer to see those in the context of the proposed rules. So you can mark them up there, and that'll give us a better idea of the content.
Right. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm not sure if we want to give it a minute or two for people to type in things.
Well, we can go ahead and move on. And folks, we've got half hour. So if you've got questions you want to throw in the chat, please do.
Okay, I'll move on then. So if you can add those questions as I speak. So like I said before in the previous workshop, Commerce is requesting, so we have a list of existing public energy districts, district energy systems. However, we hope you can provide us with some additional details. We request that all public buildings connected to a district system just provide a list of buildings, including square footage for each building, address, property name, parcel number, and if they already have a Commerce building ID. Probably in our next workshop, we'll provide instructions how to get that to us. But for the most part, we're just repeating this just so you can gather that information to share with us later. And then as we've been sharing this comment form, there's many different ways to submit comments. The main one we prefer you send to us is using the comment form and then just kind of writing your comments within the Word document. So when you download, if you click on the link for the proposed documents, it's actually on a Box account. So just hit download. You don't have to log into Box, just allow it to download. It may end up in your download folder. And then just write your comments within. And then there's a section that says upload a file, and you could upload it directly. If you do decide to email it, you can email it to buildings@commerce.wa.gov. Be sure to mark the subject line House Bill 1390 comments. We received dozens of questions and various topics. We just want to make sure your comments aren't lost in that sea of emails. And then in the future, we'll have a public hearing and we can hear your verbal testimonies. And then our next workshop will be workshop 3, March 7, 2020, March 7. That's next month between 10 to 12. The draft, and we'll cover just more of draft rules and then specific topic on the administrative requirements. We try to get these proposed rules before the workshop, either the day before or the morning of. So just look out for those. And if you have any questions before that, between workshops or how any of this process goes, feel free to email us at buildings@commerce.wa.gov. And let's wait a few just for the questions. And then if we don't receive any questions, we can just wrap up early. What do you think of that, Luke?
My rumbling stomach would think that. But we're here till 30. I think I can make it.
Okay.
Till 12. Till 12.
I just wanted to mention, just echo what Luke said. It's so helpful if you kind of mark up our Word documents and our proposed rules. We really do we do review all the comments and take into considerations. And we appreciate all that comes in. And we do have lengthy discussions about them. So they will not go unnoticed.
So we did have a question come in. Can you clarify, is the benchmarking deadline still to be determined, or was it confirmed as December 2025?
Yeah, so all dates will be June of the year rather than, but benchmarking will be, we haven't determined in our administrative requirements whether it's going to be required when you start your plan. So do you need to report to us by June of 2024, which is this June, the benchmarking for the campus, or whether we're going to just wait until the June of 2025? We certainly need to have it in the decarbonization plan. The benefit of the campus building owner to benchmarking by June 2024 when they're starting the plan is they have their baseline established, and that decarbonization plan can start with the knowledge of where they are now and where they need to get in terms of building performance or campus energy performance.
So Luke, as a follow-on to that, if benchmarking will be required this year, will an extension be available to allow time for installing meters?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that we need to consider. It's not going to be possible for buildings that for campuses that need to sub-meter in order to benchmark, and those sub-meters are not currently in place. So we would certainly make an exception for that.
All right, next question. Has there been an estimate of the cost associated with compliance with the proposed rules per square foot or whatever?
Commerce hasn't done any estimation of compliance with the decarbonization plan requirements. There is currently an effort right now in a Clean Buildings work group, which is working on creating some cost analysis of compliance with the standard in general. But I don't believe that evaluation is going to take a look at the cost of the decarbonization. Not sure if any other commerce folks have any more to say about costs associated with the decarbonization plan.
Is there cost analysis with the bill fiscal notes at the legislative level?
It was not included in the bill, but most of the time it's a small business economic impact statement. And since the bill is a requirement for state buildings,
Oh, there you go.
yeah.
There has been some requests for examples of district energy system decarbonization plans. Commerce has taken note of that, and we are working to provide some of those. So in the future, we hope to have those available. Those can be specifically useful for those privately owned campuses that are interested in opting into the decarbonization plan.
Next question, will the cost analysis consider deferred maintenance? For example, building equipment that is due for replacement but will instead be replaced by the district equipment that is shared by many buildings.
Yep. Yeah, the life cycle cost analysis does consider deferred maintenance. As far as if that question is specific to the evaluation that the current work group is doing, I believe that would be consistent as well.
Yes, that is what I was asking.
For
Thank
the
you.
Clean Buildings Work Group, yes.
Yeah.
So Jeanette, we'll make sure that we carry that question over to that work group.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they'll get that information, but I think it's a really good point they need to address.
Yep.
So we do have a question. What life cycle cost analysis tool is required to be used for this analysis?
So the cost effectiveness of the decarbonization plan is only required when the investment criteria performance metric is to be pursued as the methodology of meeting the performance metric of the standard itself. There does not need to be a life cycle cost analysis in the decarbonization plan otherwise. So if the plan is to meet the energy use intensity target pathway of the clean building standard, no life cycle cost analysis is required in the decarbonization plan. For those that are choosing to pursue the investment criteria rather than a UIT path, that decarbonization plan would include the life cycle cost analysis form F in accordance with the investment criteria of Annex X of the standard. So form F is the life cycle cost analysis tool developed specifically for the clean building standard. It's based off of the life cycle cost analysis tool through OFM and the one that DES uses as well. But it's a little bit, it's got some amendments specific to the legislative requirements of the clean building standard. Looks like Adeline is directing us to it within our document library on the Clean Buildings website. It's Form F. And the intent was to make Form F a little more user-friendly than the existing tools used by OFM and DES. They were developed in with the original author of the form. Jim, I see your note here. We will make sure that we get a copy of these proposed rules out to you directly to the email you included.
Great, thank you.
Well,
Okay.
Lynn, you want to wrap her up?
Yep. Looks like the questions have died down. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at buildings@commerce.wa.gov. Please submit your comments through the comment form. We'll see you at our next rulemaking on March 7 at 10 a.m. Don't forget to register. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Have a great day.